American political support for Israel is often viewed as a permanent, immovable fixture of global politics. Today, the alignment between the two nations appears so complete that it is rarely questioned. Yet in the 1920s and 30s, the movement's leadership were far from confident. They realized that openly demanding a Jewish state on land populated by a non-Jewish majority would appear undemocratic and risk accusations of dual allegiance among American citizens. They responded by adopting a strategy called Palestinianism. This was a quieter approach that focused strictly on funding Jewish institutions in Palestine rather than making overt political demands for statehood. This era of Zionism in America was defined by caution. The movement's leadership understood that an aggressive public push for a state lacked organic backing from the broader American public. The outbreak of World War II changed that calculation. The global conflict became the catalyst for a radical shift in how the movement approached American power. By 1939, future Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion recognized that the United States would hold the decisive influence at the end of the war. He declared that America was now the main arena for the Zionist movement. This strategy relied on the realization by leaders like Moshe Shartok that millions of Jewish Americans lived in the nerve centers of U.S. politics and media, an untapped source of political leverage. To mobilize this demographic, the American Zionist Emergency Council, or AZEC, was established. It was designed to act as a centralized machine for political and public relations. The alignment of American policy that followed was the intended outcome of this AZEC machine, which set out to build a consensus where none had previously existed. Under Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver, AZEC secured immense resources. By 1943, their working budget reached $500,000, a massive sum when a loaf of bread cost only 5 cents. Beyond their own budget, Zionists gained influence over the United Jewish Appeal, giving the movement access to a virtually bottomless war chest. This chart tracks that explosive growth. In 1941, they raised $14 million. By 1948, it reached $150 million. 4 times what Americans contributed to the Red Cross during the same period. In today's money, that equals roughly $1.5 billion. This scale of funding allowed AZEC to deploy resources into every department of American life, creating a juggernaut of systemic nationwide influence. AZEC used its capital to build an expansive network. They established 400 local committees and 76 regional branches to target specific sectors of society, including clergy, labor unions, and business leaders. Their efficiency was demonstrated in 1945. When Bookish policy threatened their goals, AZEC booked Madison Square Garden and mailed 250,000 flyers on the first day. By day 2, they coordinated protests in 30 cities and pressured 27 U.S. senators to deliver speeches. Their campaign also targeted education and media. They placed pamphlets in libraries and influenced school boards and secretly subsidized books by non-Jewish authors to create the appearance of a wide academic consensus. This highly coordinated deployment created an inescapable illusion of organic, nationwide grassroots support. Opposition did exist, but it was quickly marginalized. Anti-Zionist Jewish Americans, like Rabbi Elmer Berger, attempted to organize against the machine, but they could not compete with the lobby's financial power. Dissenters were subjected to savage personal attacks, a tactic that effectively used fear to silence potential critics and keep them from organizing. This pressure reached the highest levels of government. When President Harry Truman appeared hesitant to support the Zionist agenda, intimidation tactics entered the Oval Office. A New York Democrat in Congress reportedly pounded on Truman's desk and threatened to run the president out of town if he did not comply with the movement's demands. AZEC did not just seek agreement, they systematically dismantled the political and public ability to disagree. One of AZEC's most effective tactics was the secret funding of Christian groups. In 1946, they funneled $150,000 to revive an elite Protestant group called the American Palestine Committee. Zionist headquarters issued a strict directive: organize a local chapter of the Christian Council on Palestine in every single community across the country. These were not independent organizations. Zionist leaders frequently placed newspaper advertisements using the names of Christian clergy members, often without consulting the individuals listed. These front groups capitalized on the tragedy of the Nazi refugee crisis, framing Palestine as the sole possible solution to exploit traditional American humanitarian values. This widespread Christian support was a manufactured facade, presenting a calculated geopolitical goal as a religious and humanitarian mandate. The American public was largely unaware that creating this state would require the displacement of hundreds of thousands of non-Jews who formed the vast majority of the region's population. Well-meaning supporters were led to endorse a plan that would create a new and much longer-lasting refugee crisis. In May 1948, the reality of the conflict contradicted the humanitarian narrative that had been sold to the American public. Christian leaders reported that Zionist forces were indiscriminately shelling churches and convents, causing hundreds of casualties, including children and clergy. One Catholic priest detailed accounts of soldiers breaking down church doors, stealing sacred objects, and throwing statues of Christ into gardens. The violent reality on the ground stood in sharp contrast to the peaceful rescue mission narrative that had been packaged for American voters. The history of the 1940s reveals the foundations of our modern political reality. Historical evidence shows that American support for Israel was the direct result of a multi-million-dollar campaign built to manufacture consent and silence dissenters. This 1940s campaign established a framework of support that defined the boundaries of American foreign policy discourse for decades to come. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Chapter 7 of Against Our Better Judgment. If you found this exploration of hidden history valuable, please like the video and subscribe to the Bookish Breakdown. Understanding how political influence is engineered is the only way to make sense of the historical narratives we are handed today. Let me know what surprised you most in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.